Over the past 9 months, the policy committee has been traveling the state to learn more from our businesses about their challenges, their opportunities, ways that we might be able to be helpful, ways that we have been helpful, and that brings us to Philadelphia. So yesterday we had a terrific opportunity to visit Urban Outfitters at the Naval Shipyard. We also visited with FS Investment and Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technologies. And we heard from them about not only the opportunities that they've found really great for Pennsylvania and attracting them and keeping them. We also talked about some of the challenges like transportation. We talked with the venture capitalists about the challenges for small business startups and what they need and their efforts that we need to be partnering on. And I do anticipate that we'll hear some more of that today. We are fortunate to have PIDC, the Manufacturers Association, Select Greater Philadelphia, and Unisys Corp here that will be testifying for us. And I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. And I'm sure that we're going to have robust conversations. And we really like to keep this interactive. So that's what we'll intend to do. But before I welcome our testifiers, let's start with introduction of the members. And I want to make it clear from the beginning that we have a lot of committees here today. And you will see members leaving. It's not because they're trying to be rude or, create disruption. They are heading to another committee. So please don't let that get you off your stride, and we'll try to keep things moving as good as we can. So with that, you, Rep. Hershey.
Great. I'm John Hershey from Juniata, Mifflin, and Franklin counties.
Hi, Marcia Hahn, 138 Northampton County.
Thank you, Marcia. Good morning, Mindy Fee, 37th Northern Lancaster County.
Good morning, Marcy Topol from Montgomery County.
Sue Helm, the 104th, Dauphin and Lebanon counties.
Representative Kerry Benninghoff, Center, Mifflin County, home of the Penn State Nittany Lions.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Craig Statz from neighboring Bucks County, representing the 145th District.
Mike Jones, York County.
Doyle Heffley, Carbon County.
Barry Joswiak, Berks County, home of the Reading Phillies.
Good morning, everyone. I'm State Representative Martina White, and if I may, I'd just like to briefly thank very much our leadership team from Harrisburg that came down here, Donna Oberlander as Chair of Policy. We are so grateful that you've joined us here in Philadelphia for these past few days to learn about all of the benefits of what the state resources have provided to our, not only our Commonwealth, but specifically to our region. Especially as it pertains to transportation issues and some of the tax benefits as well. But thank you so much again for being here today. We really genuinely appreciate it.
And I am Torn Ecker from Adams and Cumberland County.
Great, thank you. We also have with us Representative Rigby and Representative Lawrence, Chester County and Cambria. Very good. Okay, with that, we're going to welcome John Grady, President of Pennsylvania Industrial Development Corporation. Thank you for being here, John, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it, and have some prepared remarks that I'll walk through, but I do want to echo Representative White's comments that from everyone here in Philadelphia, we really appreciate this opportunity. This is something we've worked on for the last few years with a number of different committees, and to have the opportunity to host you in Philadelphia, to see some of the things that we're doing here in Philadelphia. And I think, one of the things we're very conscious of is that we really can't accomplish a lot here without partnership at the local level and at the state level. And we want people to see that we are good stewards of the state's resources and the state's taxpayers' resources. And we think no better way to see that than to come down and see the things that are happening in the city because of the support and the legislation, the investment that come out of Harrisburg every day. So thank you very much. As you may know, PIDC is a private nonprofit corporation. We were created in 1958, and we're a little bit unique in that we are a partnership between the City of Philadelphia government, the mayor and his cabinet, and the business community here in the city and region acting through the Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce. Our organization as a nonprofit is governed by a board that is jointly appointed by the mayor and the business community, and the notion of partnership is very central to everything that we do. Our mission is to spur investment and support business growth. We invest both public and private resources in the small businesses, the community-based development, the larger economic development, and the real estate activities throughout Philadelphia that create jobs, revitalize neighborhoods, and drive growth to every corner of Philadelphia. We support the efforts of the Commonwealth's Department of Community and Economic Development in particular as a major partner in our work, along with the City of Philadelphia's Department of Commerce and our Chamber's Select Greater Philadelphia Business Attraction Arm. We all work together to attract businesses to Pennsylvania and to Philadelphia by deploying financing, real estate, and local assistance as businesses that are here seek to grow, and as we look to attract and retain more businesses. When we talk about attracting businesses to Pennsylvania, one of the recent experiences that we think was extremely helpful and a learning experience for us was the Amazon HQ2 process. I was walking over to the breakfast session this morning, and it kind of struck me that that process started almost 2 years ago to the day. It was just after Labor Day in 2017 when Amazon announced that they were going to open a second headquarters. They projected 50,000 jobs. And I think within about 6 weeks, 238 different localities submitted proposals as part of that process. When we went through that process, there were several lessons and takeaways about business attraction in today's economy that we were fortunate to learn from. PIDC was proud to play a role in that. We co-chaired a local, diverse group of stakeholders here that was organized in response to that initiative. And some of the things that we saw coming out of that, there's 4 kind of primary takeaways that we learned, I think, about our business attraction efforts. And I wanted to talk briefly about each of those 4. The first one is that for Philadelphia, I think we learned that our product is much better than our perception. And what I mean by that is Amazon, when they came, particularly when they came to visit Philadelphia as part of this process, and they had a team of kind of senior executives from across the company, when they came to visit, they didn't really know much about Philadelphia. They knew a lot about our history, they knew a lot about our tourism, they knew a lot about our sports teams, thankfully, hopefully for the better. But they didn't really know what the economy was like in southeastern Pennsylvania. They didn't really understand the dynamics of the business community here. And that really helped us understand that we had to really focus our pitch to them. And I think that's especially true when we think about what makes southeastern Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and in a lot of respects, the larger Commonwealth, attractive to businesses. And for us, it was learning that there were a mix of really distinguishing characteristics for us around our labor pool, the transit and mobility within the Philadelphia and Southeast region, our affordability as a major metropolitan area, particularly compared to some of the other northeastern U.S. cities that they were evaluating at the time, the quality of life that results from that affordability, and the capacity we have here in the city to support growth. They were surprised by everything that they learned with regard to those things. And what we hope is that those things give us an opportunity to leverage future discussions with employers, with Amazon and others, about how they can take advantage of these things that Philadelphia and the region and the Commonwealth have to offer. But at the same time, I think that their lack of awareness also reminds us that we need to invest more in our brand as a destination for employers, for talent, and we need to broadcast that message more widely. The fact that they came into that room at a deficit, not knowing enough about Philadelphia and about the region and about the Commonwealth, tells us that other parts of the country are further ahead of us in getting their story out. We market this way really successfully for tourism, and the messages they had heard about Philadelphia were really about tourism, which was great. The Commonwealth has been a tremendous investor in the expansion of our tourism, our hospitality, and our convention economy here, and we see the results of that directly in increased tourism numbers, increased convention business, and the tax revenue that goes associated with those things. We think it's really important to fund, invest in, and execute on marketing campaigns that promote Philadelphia and Pennsylvania similarly as a place for work, and to really highlight those advantages that we have for work. If we can get a stronger message out there about Pennsylvania and Philadelphia as a place to work, the sales effort of being in front of someone and trying to close a transaction is going to be much easier. We're going to get invited to more of those discussions, and we're going to be more successful in closing more of them. The second thing that we took away was I think we learned that we were in that process, and we will continue to be a real contender for business growth. And hopefully you saw some of those things in your trip yesterday. If you were out in University City, you saw the really booming economy, particularly around our life sciences, around our universities and our higher education institutions and research institutions. You see it from a company like Amicus Therapeutics, who spent some time with folks yesterday to talk about why they came here to establish their research and development center from central New Jersey, and all of the factors about why we were able to compete strongly for that. In the Amazon process, we know we competed really well. Once we overcame that deficit, we were able to sell them on the advantage of being here. We were on that short list, and we feel like we made a real dent in their perceptions about the city. And I think what's great for Pennsylvania is Pittsburgh did the same thing. So we were only one of 2 states in the country that was able to have 2 major locations compete for this. And we had very similar stories in terms of the assets that Pennsylvania had to offer an employer like that. Indications are, I think, that we both Philadelphia and Pittsburgh did very well on that. And we did well because we had that strong story to tell relative to their needs as an employer. We spoke with one voice here in the city and in the region. The Commonwealth, members of the legislature, the governor's administration were all supportive of that message. And I think that that unified message will allow us to compete going forward so that people understand when they come into anywhere in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, if they're in Philadelphia, if they're in the Southeast, if they're in another region in the state, that there's a consistent and coordinated support for economic development, for jobs, and for the growth and expansion of investment. Part of that here, I think, in Philadelphia was engaging a broad base of public and private interests, diverse organizations, economic development, tourism, hospitality, public officials, but also engaging our resident base. And when we talk about continuing to be a real contender, we need to be able to let the business community know that Philadelphia and Pennsylvania are open for jobs and for growth. Right? It's not lost on everyone that one of the locations that Amazon picked in New York really was unable to close on that decision. And a lot of it had to do with an inability to kind of organize all the diverse interests that had to be supportive of that activity. I think we can continue to be a real contender if we sustain a broad base of support for employment, for the growth of employment, and for the investment and development that are required to support a continued growth in our tax base. Number 3, we will win or lose based on talent. I think in economic development today, very different than maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago, certainly when I started my career, it used to be that employees would go find jobs. What we see today is that employers go find employees. Talent is at a premium at all levels of the workforce, from entry levels all the way through advanced levels. And being able to produce a talented and prepared workforce is central to success in economic development in any place going forward. Amazon's decision was all about talent. Deep, diverse talent pools that combined existing tech talent in a really kind of almost narrow band of job classifications that they were looking at: computer science, engineering, hardware and software developers, I learned about user interface and user experience and all these different emerging job classifications. Those are the job classifications of the future. And those are not only the job classifications of the future in IT, they're the job classifications of the future in medicine, in business, in finance, in accounting, and in pretty much every sector of our economy. Amazon liked the ideas that the city and the Commonwealth, and I'm sure in Pittsburgh, that we're able to put forward around building pipelines for those talent pools, to grow the talent that we have here in the region and to attract more talent. I think they had the confidence that we had the people and systems in place to do that, but they wanted to see more talent on day one. Why did they pick New York and DC? They picked them because they're gigantic labor pools, and they picked them because that's outside of Seattle, the #1 and #2 places where they have employment, New York and Northern Virginia. So they really wanted to know that those tech talent pipelines and pools of talent were in place. We need to catch up and continue to build that infrastructure from our K through 12 systems all the way through our higher education systems. Amazon was clear they didn't really see Philadelphia as an engineering city or a computer science city. They saw us as a diverse economy, which is good, but they really wanted to see more of that tech talent. We have a strong presence of engineering schools in the region and certainly throughout the Commonwealth. Schools like Penn and Drexel, Lehigh and Penn State and Carnegie Mellon and Pitt. We have great assets in the Commonwealth around these areas. We need them to collaborate and we need them to produce talent around the Commonwealth, engage with industry around the Commonwealth. We need the Commonwealth, higher education, and employers to help us develop and grow a strategy to attract talent and employers, particularly in these tech fields, starting with high-quality high school options in technology, community colleges, certificates in these fields. It's not all about a bachelor's degree necessarily in the tech economy. It's about having the right technical certifications and the right credentials to be able to enter the workforce. I think it's instructive if you look at Virginia's decision in attracting Amazon to Northern Virginia. I think if there was one thing that, probably several things that drew them to Northern Virginia, but clearly one of them was the Commonwealth of Virginia committed to invest more than $1 billion in a new engineering and computer science campus for Virginia Tech and for George Mason. It's across the street, literally, from Amazon's new campus. And again, having that access, that direct access to the faculty, to the students, and to the alumni bases of these institutions was really central to their ability to know that they had comfort in the tech talent pipeline. New York did a similar thing with Cornell's new technology campus on Roosevelt Island, recognizing that putting those employees and those professors and that environment in close proximity to the employer. And then the last thing I think that I would focus on from Philadelphia's perspective is that our location is a huge asset that we cannot waste. Amazon's decision reaffirms that the Northeast Corridor is where large and fast-growing employers see the biggest opportunities for talent and for growth. Making initial decisions to be in New York and Northern Virginia, D.C. confirms that. In some respects, choosing expensive markets like New York and Virginia shows just how important it is to be close to those deep talent pools. So making investments that reinforce our location in the Northeast, supporting mobility within our region and connecting our region better to our neighbors to the north and south is really important if we're going to compete as a Commonwealth and as a region and as a city for attracting employment going forward. Philadelphia is the natural kind of next Northeast Corridor innovation hub. We're well ahead of places like Providence and Stamford and Newark and Baltimore. And we see big cities like Boston, New York, and DC that are becoming more expensive, more difficult to develop in, and more resistant to the growth that these employers need. That creates a great opportunity for Philadelphia and for Pennsylvania to step in the void. When we started the Amazon effort, we created a website called Philadelphia Delivers. So if you go to www.philadelphiadelivers.com, you can see our pitch. We've kind of taken the Amazon aspect out of it, and we've used all of the research and the data and the marketing messages to put them out there about the region here and the benefits we have in the region. We're using that as a central site now to do a lot of our communication about business growth in the region, and we see opportunities to continue to grow and advance those messages using that same core message that was so successful. We very much appreciate the support and the spotlight that you are shining on our opportunity to make Pennsylvania and Philadelphia more competitive, both for current employers who are seeking to grow, right? Our biggest successes are always growing the people and the jobs and the communities that are here, as well as attracting new employers and new jobs to the city and the region and the Commonwealth. Thank you for the opportunity to present some testimony this morning, and I'm happy to answer questions in any way that I can.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Grady. Do we have any questions? Great. Okay. Before we turn it over to Marcy Topol, I wanted to just first say how much I appreciate your willingness to share what you learned. And I was really, I like what you said about product is better than our perception. And I think many times that happens. We don't realize how wonderful things are or the things that we have to offer, and I appreciate you sharing that and then learning from that experience. My question is on some of the things that we talked about yesterday with Urban Outfitters and your work with them.
Sure.
I understand that you're an industrial development corporation, but can you talk about the number of properties, the diversity that you have in terms of your recruitment or retention, and do you continue to work with those businesses as they move along?
Sure. Yeah, Urban Outfitters is a great poster child for some of the success we've seen in the repositioning of the Navy Yard in particular, but of our economy really generally, right? Urban Outfitters moved to the Navy Yard. They're a Philadelphia company, started out in University City, literally on Penn's campus. They moved to the Navy Yard a little less than 10 years ago. They had 600 people working on their headquarters campus 10 years ago. They have almost 3,000 people working on that campus today. And as an organization, like I said, a couple of things. One is we work very closely with DCED and in our region with Chamber of Commerce in Select Greater Philadelphia and our City Commerce Department around this topic of business attraction. Although we are the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation for the last several decades, our real focus has been on how do we diversify and grow our economic base. We were founded as an entity in the late 50s when industry and manufacturing were the real focus and the real driver of our economy. Over the last few decades, what we've looked at is how do we take capital and land and use it to try and diversify the economy here in the city. So we've made significant investments and continue to invest in our small business sector. We're very focused on our neighborhood commercial corridors and the jobs that are growing in neighborhood districts around the city. The city's 120 square miles. We've got over 100 commercial districts throughout the city. We've made a business loan to every one of those zip codes in Philadelphia except for one in the last 5 years. And we'll get to that one soon. So a real commitment, number one, to the diverse small business base in the city is part of our focus. Secondly, we've really tried to target the growth in a couple of sectors. You saw the life sciences sector up close yesterday in University City. So education, medicine, life sciences. Cell and gene therapy right now is a major competitive advantage for Philadelphia. We have the best science in the world around cell and gene therapies. We have researchers and companies in University City, I think you met with Amicus yesterday, who are curing cancer. They're not treating cancer, they're not making people's lives more comfortable with cancer, they are eliminating cancer. The first 7 FDA approvals for gene therapies for drugs are based on research and commercialization activity in the city of Philadelphia, in University City. That sector is critical to our growth. We've also very much focused in the tourism and hospitality sector. The Commonwealth has been a huge investor in this. The Pennsylvania Convention Center, the decision to build that center downtown, across the street, use it as an anchor to really drive a new economy with hotels and restaurants and retail and all the commercial amenities that a major commercial tourism destination requires. I think Visit Philadelphia, the regional promoter of tourism, had an event last week or 2 weeks ago where they announced that more than 40 million people visited Philadelphia last year. Wow. That number has more than doubled over the last decade. And they're staying longer and they're spending more money and they're generating more tax revenue. We continue to be very focused around our financial services and professional business sectors. The region in particular is very strong in financial services with companies like Vanguard and SEI Investments and Lincoln Financial as major anchor employers in our region. And then lastly, we continue to be focused in the manufacturing sector. Manufacturing today is very different than it was in 1960 in Philadelphia. It's more diverse. It's smaller, it's more technology enabled. We have great manufacturing clusters in Northeast Philadelphia, particularly in Representative White's district. We have great manufacturing districts in the southwest part of the city. We own and operate and have developed 5 industrial parks around Philadelphia to make sure we retain industry and manufacturing and logistics as a sector, because they create really important jobs at different parts of our labor sector that sustain family jobs throughout the city. We're seeing a lot of investment in that sector now in transportation and logistics. We're seeing Philadelphia, because of the density of population here, that particularly the online retailers who might be building really large warehouses out in Lehigh Valley in particular, right? What they need is a warehouse that's 400,000 square feet to everybody. When you call Amazon, you want something to show up in an hour, right? Now they need to be able to have those kinds of people and supports and facilities in place to do that. And we're seeing a lot of jobs being created in that sector as well. So our commitment is very much to a diverse economy here in Philadelphia. We think that makes us more resilient in economic cycles. Philadelphia has more people working in the city, more Philadelphians working and more jobs in Philadelphia than we've had since the early 1980s. So more than 30 years of record jobs here. Our population continues to grow, 12 straight years of population growth. And in the last 2 or 3 years, that job growth exceeds the national averages and the averages of our peer cities. So we're starting to see the benefits of these very consistent, very focused efforts in diversifying the economic base.
Terrific, thank you. Chairman Topol.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. Thank you for your testimony. I have a question about the talent pool, which you named as one of the biggest challenges to attracting a company like Amazon. And since I've been a legislator for 9 years, I've been hearing about the disconnect between our educational organizations, our schools, our higher ed, and the workforce and business needs in Pennsylvania. So it doesn't seem, are we actually making any inroads here? And I mean, what do you see as the challenges of the great colleges and universities we have in Pennsylvania? There's no doubt we have very talented people there, but there's still a disconnect of the needs of the workforce and what we're turning out as far as degrees and what training our folks are receiving.
Yep. I have a couple comments on that. I would say the first is, I think there's been great success in the Southeast region and in the city around retaining college graduates. I think that was one of the first objectives we had, right? We have, just in this region, we have 100 colleges and universities. They graduate 90,000 people a year. And we know that 15 or 20 years ago, maybe 40% of those would stay. Campus Philly is a terrific regional organization that does great work with the colleges and universities and employers to get those college students to see the opportunities that are here. They issued a report last week, or I guess it was last month now, where more than 60% of those students are staying in Philadelphia or the region to pursue employment and to raise families and to build their careers. So I think that's one real nice measure of success, that over a sustained period of time, we're seeing an economy that's growing and we're seeing jobs that are being retained by people that are coming into the region and staying here. I think the second point about the constant need to better connect employer and the skills that the employer is looking for with our education system, I think is an ongoing issue. And part of that is driven by there's a lot of disruption in the employer skill area. Employers are looking for different kinds of skills, right? I was talking to a partner in one of the big 4 accounting firms the other day about their recruiting and how they recruit students. And he said that this last year, in their incoming class, kids that are graduating from college that are starting, more of the students were engineering majors going into accounting than there were accounting majors. which kind of tells you something about this disruption, where it used to be you went in, you got your 4-year degree in accounting, and you went to work for a big accounting firm, right? This transition in skill sets, mostly driven by technology, is creating a big disruption. And I think the education sector, both the K through 12 sector and the higher education sector, are still trying to kind of react to that and align with the skills that are necessary. The third thing I'd say is I think that's why you're seeing more and more focus on certifications and other types of skill credentials, because employers are starting to look for some very specific things. It might be in coding, it might be in cybersecurity. They want to know that you have some very specific skills. It might still be important to have a college degree and to be able to think and communicate and do all those other things, but these emerging skills are creating real pressure on the employer, and then behind that, they place pressure on the schools. I think in Philadelphia, we've seen some sustained progress in our schools, particularly at the K through 12 and the community college level. Great success that was featured not that long ago in our local press. The school district has created what's called a middle college. So they're working with community college to take kids in high school and have them on a path that when they graduate from high school, they will have completed up to 2 years towards their associate's degree. That makes college more affordable. It makes their career options when they get out of high school more diverse. And it makes the employer, gives them a deeper pool of talent to be able to draw from across the spectrum. I think we need to continue to stay very closely tied to employers and hear what employers are saying, and we need to be able to incorporate what they're saying into these different pathways forward. The education system is a very big system, and it needs to be able to be flexible to hear and respond to that kind of change from the employer sector.
Thank you. Representative Ecker?
Thank you, Mr. Grady. Thank you for your testimony. I just kind of brief question. We talked a lot about Amazon and their interests, but are you seeing employers or companies looking to, and again, this is kind of a full breadth, but are employers looking to be in urban centers, suburban centers, or what are your conversations that you're having with some larger employers? And what's their interest as far as where they want to be located? I know that kind of depends on the sector, but as a whole, what has been your experience?
I think in general, and I spend my day promoting Philadelphia as a place for employment, so I'm focused on a little bit on the urban sector. But in a city like Philadelphia, we have places like the Navy Yard and our parks in Northeast Philadelphia that are more suburban in terms of the scale and environment. So we see both. I think if there's one generalization I could make, it's my comment earlier, which is employers feel tremendous pressure to find talent. And I think employers are much more open now to different settings based upon where the talent wants to be. We've seen a big disruption in the workforce as the baby boomer generation starts to retire. The largest generation in the workforce, and as it retires, it's creating these large gaps, and the millennial and post-millennial generations are starting to fill that. And employers, I think, are responding by saying, we want to put our finger on the pulse of where the talent wants to be, and we'll be there. We've had a great experience with an employer. Vanguard's a terrific employer in the region here. They have over 10,000 people working largely in Montgomery and Chester County. They saw some of this, and 2 or 3 years ago, opened a satellite office in the city because they wanted to give people a chance that wanted to be in an urban environment, that they could work for Vanguard and have an office in the city. And I think more and more as people, it's a little bit of a fluid situation. It's not, this isn't going to be the case for the next 50 years. We have a lot of focus on the millennial generation and their desires. As that generation starts to age and as they start to make family decisions, and what we're seeing is that employers are seeing the talent. Maybe they're in Philadelphia, or maybe they're in a Montgomery County. I think what we're seeing is people want that kind of town feel, whether it's in a big city or whether it's in a rural area or whether it's in an older suburb. And I think as long as we can provide those lifestyle choices for people, and as long as we can connect them through a strong transit system, So again, the importance around transportation and SEPTA, then I think we can provide both for people. And ultimately, I think that's what employers want to see. Employers generally want to manage risk and they want to mitigate risk. So, you know, we don't expect Vanguard to move 10,000 people into Philadelphia, right? Maybe someday they'll have 500 people in Philadelphia. And I think as a city and as a region and as a Commonwealth, if we have places where talent can have a lifestyle, where they can have good schools, where they can raise families, then I think we can show employers that we can give them whichever setting they want. So I think there's a lot about this movement back into cities, and I think there's something to that, right? Our population statistics reaffirm. We've had 12 consecutive years of population growth in the city, probably after 30 consecutive years of decline.
Next, we have Representative Jozwiak.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I also want to recognize Bill Keller. He retired in December, and I got to know him in the House of Representatives as a man that, when it came to issues in Philadelphia, he was really on the money. He represented this city very well. And the one thing that impressed me the most about him is when he would tell us something, and I'm on the other side of the aisle from him, his word was good. If he said it, he did it. So, Bill, it's good to see you. I'm really glad to see you. And he's here today. He's still interested. The other thing I wanted to mention was when you talk about you're going to win or lose by talent, my grandson just graduated from Drexel as an engineer. And last November, he was getting job offers. He had 6 months to go in school. And what impressed me the most is as soon as I would tell these engineering companies he was at Drexel and was going to graduate, they would pull out their business cards and say, have him call me right away. You know, they didn't want to wait till May. They wanted to call him now. And he had like 10 or 11 job offers before he even graduated, and actually he had to negotiate 2 weeks off. After school, they wanted him to come to work right away, but he wanted to go to the shore. But that's the reputation that Drexel and Penn State, that's the reputation those colleges have. That technology at those schools are unbelievable, and whatever you're doing to help them do what they're doing and keep that reputation there, it's there. It really is there. So the question I had was, with all the development that you're working on, you have these companies wanting to come in here. Do you help them with some RCAP money or with the LERTAs? Do you help them with their tax incentives?
Yes, we do. And I would just note, they didn't tell us that Bill Keller retired. I thought he was still working.
He's behind the scenes.
I can feel the laser stare of Bill Keller right from behind me still, so I always know when he's in the room. Your comment about Drexel and similar schools. Drexel, one of the things I'd comment about Drexel is, they've really built a strong reputation in the marketplace around their co-op program, and particularly in the engineering school. And they really give, through the Drexel co-op program, is you take 5 years to go through college, but you spend at least 3 of your semesters in the workplace working for an employer. And an incredibly high percentage of kids end up starting their careers with one of their co-op employers. So it speaks very much to the question you had, Representative, about how do we make sure we build these connections with the employer community. So I wanted to recognize that. In our work at PIDC, we very much work with business owners around all of the different local, state, and federal resources that are available to support development in the city. So in Philadelphia, we manage an organization called the Philadelphia Authority for Industrial Development. That is the RCAP entity for Philadelphia County. So all of the RCAPs that are awarded in Philadelphia County are administered by our organization. That allows us to make sure that we're connecting those resources with the business owners and the developers that are most actively engaged in growing jobs here in the city, and so that the administration of those programs is as efficient as possible. We also work very closely with the city. Our colleagues in the city's Commerce Department, Harold Epps and his team at the Commerce Department, really are the front door for business attraction. So as they come into the city, working with Commerce, we organize a committee called the Developer Services Committee, so we can put all of the regulatory entities, the utilities, and the governmental regulators in the room with those businesses so that they can have an efficient process coming through the governmental approval processes. And that includes resources at the local level too, our tax increment financing, all of the tax incentive programs and tax abatement programs, state programs like the Keystone Opportunity Zone and those kinds of resources are all very much coordinated through our organization and our partnership with the Chamber of Commerce and the City Commerce Department.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad you brought up the co-op program because exactly what you said is what happened with my grandson. He was on those co-ops. The businesses got a chance to look at them. He got a chance to look at them, and he went to work for one of them.
Yep.
So,
and it's as important for the students to get to know the businesses, right? Like it's a very much a real world experience of what does it mean to be in a workplace, and you're going to make these decisions for the rest of your life, and it's a great asset for the students as well as the employer.
yeah, even the employer, they're looking for somebody with a good work ethic.
Correct.
And that's where they get to see it. So, thank you very much for your testimony, and I'm very impressed with everything you're saying because you eat and sleep this stuff. You're not even reading it. You're just talking about it. So you really know what you're talking about.
Thank you. I don't know if I know what I'm talking about, but I love Philadelphia. I love growing the city and the region here, and it's actually a real privilege to do what I do every day. So,
thank you, Mrs. Chairwoman.
Okay, next we have the Majority Whip, Benninghoff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. John, thank you very much for having us here in your gracious city again. I always enjoy it. Make sure you tell Harold I said hello. But it's interesting.
I was recovering from a broken ankle. Otherwise, he would be here with us, as you know.
Well, you're working him too hard, but he's a good fellow and nice to talk with. And we appreciate the welcome of the city and being hosted here. As I've listened to you talk about your experience with Amazon, which obviously was an experience for the Commonwealth, as rural reps, it's kind of good for us to hear the Philadelphia experience and with your own renaissance and changing. I think it's interesting when your one comment about employees used to have to go looking for jobs. Now you got employers looking for a job. I'm interested in, and we saw a lot of this at Urban Outfitters, about the environment that people work in, much different. It's not kind of tied to your desk, punched in 8 to 5, but obviously you have pet friendly here. You have very flexible workforces. You have workspaces that are attractive, intriguing. I think the shared space is phenomenal and something that we could probably duplicate in some of the more rural areas. My overreaching question for this is my fear as we see other states making some major investments and we as a Commonwealth are looking at this, how do we not end up getting our own great workforce that you have developed and encouraged pirated from someone else to pull them away? I mean, I see Philadelphia as a real mecca for biomed, great sciences going on here, great cancer research and rare disease. But I'm seeing some of these other states, you and I talked privately earlier, whether it's Texas, New York, Massachusetts, making major investments. I would suspect with today's technology and the ability to communicate, it doesn't take long for them to say, I'm going to Philly, I'm going to pull some of these people out of here. How do we prevent that? And I guess as I say to my staff, if you were king for a day and you could give us some direction as a Commonwealth, what would you encourage us to be doing?
Well, I think you're very smart to be focused on that issue because the competition for talent is intense, and it doesn't have boundaries. People are mobile, companies are mobile, right? Talent and people, if they're willing to go to another region, can pick up and with a laptop be anywhere they want to be. So that mobility it has reverberating effects throughout the economy, right? I think that one response I would say is, the competition for talent is definitely intense, and in a sector like life sciences, as you indicated, particularly intense in a city like Philadelphia, because our institutions and our private companies here have the best talent in, I mentioned it earlier, in cell and gene therapy. Right? At the University of Pennsylvania and Children's Hospital, Dr. Carl June and Dr. Jim Wilson. They're our corporate CEOs now, right? They're developing cures for cancer. And if you ask the CEO of the University of Pennsylvania Health System, what does he spend more time on every day? Retaining his talent. Institutions from California, from Baltimore, from Texas, from Massachusetts are coming into Philadelphia literally every day. And if you have a great researcher, a researcher is not a person who sits in a lab and sort of messes around with microscopes. At a place like Penn, a researcher might have 70 or 100 employees in their research lab. It's a big enterprise.
Right.
And you'll have, particularly at the state level, states like Texas. Texas is about to float a second bond issue. It's a second billion-dollar initiative aimed specifically at recruiting the best medical talent in the world to come to Texas. California has a similar initiative. Massachusetts has a similar initiative. We're seeing a similar initiative in Maryland right now, particularly focused on, interestingly, the manufacturing aspects of the life sciences economy. How do we manufacture the vectors and the cells and the plasmids and all the things you need to create these cures? So that competition is intense. If I had one, and I would say it's not just in life sciences, right? Comcast continues to grow as an employer in Philadelphia. 15 years ago, they had 400 employees in Philadelphia. They have over 8,000 employees working in downtown Philadelphia today. And what's interesting about Comcast is they're recruiting people from up and down the East Coast. Right. So their message is, come to Philadelphia, right? We're growing, it's affordable, we have transit, all the things that I talked about. And they're seeing success with that. But in the life sciences, one of the things we're very focused on is that life sciences are an expensive business. You have to build laboratories these aren't just office buildings, these cost 3 times the amount of a typical office building. And we're thinking about how can we use capital resources, maybe like the state's RCAP program, like we did years ago to build convention centers and stadiums. We should be thinking about how we can use those resources to build these kinds of job creator facilities for the future. How do we make sure we have the labs and the facilities not only to support the academic researchers that are driving much of this, but when that academic researcher has a discovery, and after a few years in the university lab, they have to go out and they have to lease 10,000 square feet of space to set up their company and to get growing. If that space doesn't exist, it's going to take 3 years to build it. Yeah. And they don't have 3 years to sit around and wait. They're going to go where the space is. So I think really thinking about, and I think that you would find very similar experience in places like Pittsburgh, around the Hershey Medical Center with the Penn State facility, that being able to respond to the capital needs of these growing businesses is going to be important in order to retain them here, retain the talent here, and see the benefits.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm trying to get to everyone, but I do know that we have a few people leaving, so I'm going to jump to Representative Hahn.
Thank you.
You're next, Tekla.
And you were talking about the lab. So I'm on the Ben Franklin Partnership Board. And so, and I'm from the Lehigh Valley. So they have a great system there. They have the lab set up. So when we were touring yesterday, I asked, did they reinvent the wheel here for the labs up there? Or they couldn't meet the Ben Franklins down here have the wet labs that they need. So I know up in the Lehigh Valley, you can come in there, they help you, they get you started, they set you up. They have the conference rooms, they have everything right there. Now, and similar to what we saw yesterday. So when I asked, would you work with Ben Franklin on this? The answer was, well, they just give you startup money. And we found from our tour in the Lehigh Valley last week, well, that's not true. They have all that other, the equipment and things and help you set up shop. So are they all working together? I think we were, we also met with the Manufacturing Resource Center. So they're important, and I think everyone needs to know they're all there, they're all important things. So I want to know how they're working together here.
Sure.
I know you have a Ben Franklin in the Southeast as well.
Oh yeah, so Rosen Rosenthal and the Ben Franklin Technology Partners Southeast Pennsylvania are very active. I got to hear them speak the other day. They're the 9th most active early stage investor in the country. So they definitely focus their work in early stage capital and in the support that's necessary for companies to grow. Around the life sciences in our market, we have a relatively robust economy around lab space. So I think Ben Franklin has chosen to sort of focus their role on capital and then connect them into the marketplace for lab space and not to take on the additional task of using their relatively, and they would remind me, more limited capital to invest in labs. They've focused on investing the equity in the companies to get them growing. In our region, Ben Franklin is partnering with a development in University City that's hoping to break ground to build 300,000 square feet of new lab space that's targeted to users on the average side of 10,000 square feet. So they're definitely heavily engaged in that sector. They work closely with partners like the University City Science Center, with the institutions themselves, and with the emerging companies in the region.
And I just think it's important, especially around budget time, as everyone's coming out asking for increases in their budgets, that members understand they all work together. They all
Absolutely.
have a purpose, so you don't want to cut one funding and increase another if they're going to all work
And
together.
I would tell you a great example. So as an economic development organization here in the city, we invest in all kinds of growing businesses. One of the things we've done over the last 2 years is we're not early stage investors. So instead of us building our own organization as an early stage investor, we've partnered with Ben Franklin, we've provided them with capital, and we've said, you guys do this really well, you go do that, and we'll focus over here with different kinds of businesses. I think recognizing your strength and partnering is really important, especially when resources are limited.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Heffley?
Thank you, Chairwoman Oberlander. I appreciate the opportunity. Just real quick, as the economy changes, a few years ago, I remember everybody talking about the economic opportunity was in energy. Companies wanted stable energy costs because you had the energy spikes. We have that a lot in Pennsylvania due to natural gas right now, which is a benefit. Also, environmental permitting. Like you had explained, 3 years to build a facility. It really is insane how long it takes to do just the smallest project, just to get an HOP permit or anything like that throughout the Commonwealth. And I can imagine what the opportunities are in a city of this size. So as we work to rectify that, my question was, and I wanted to follow up a little bit more, you talked about workforce development. I liked your comment about, I think every child within the next 4 years, every child that graduates high school, if they want to, should be able to have an associate's degree at the same time. Dual enrollment with community colleges, working with the schools is a wonderful opportunity to save costs and actually come out of high school with that degree and ready to go right into the workforce. And I would also like to expand upon that into the technical aspects. I think we could do a better job getting more graduating with an associate's degree in a technical skill as well. And I think that's an opportunity as a Commonwealth that we have. But aside from that, one of the things that I hear from a lot of employers is workforce. Right? So now the energy costs, we have the energy costs, but they're looking for workforce. And there were some investments made in the district that I represent, Carbon County, purchased primarily because of the workforce that was there. It was what they wanted to invest in. How do we go about creating that workforce, whether it be through the WIB or other projects, or how do we change this philosophy? The millennials, if you want to categorize people, but the generations that are coming up, they don't look to say, like, my dad worked at Bethlehem Steel 36 years. I don't know that there's going to be companies that are going to be there 36 years. So as you look at how do we focus on the generation that's coming? How do we instill that work ethic or those values in there, and at the same time say that, you know, you're going to work for a company, but you're only going to be there maybe 5 or 6 years. How do we develop that and let them know that their talent is their value and their work ethic is their value to be productive throughout their career?
I totally agree with you, and I just happened to this week started my 22nd year at PIDC, so I definitely am feeling
You're going on 36.
part of that older kind of generation in terms of view of work, right? I think that's a challenge, but I think it's an opportunity. I think with younger people as they come into the workforce, they definitely need to be prepared before they come into the workforce with expectations. What does it mean to work, right? It's why the comments and discussion about the co-op program at Drexel, right? These are kids that are between the ages of 18 and 22 who are really for the first time getting meaningful work experience as part of their education, and it's helping them to make a better decision about where do they want to pursue work. I think when you push that back to kids that are coming out of high school, that's even harder, right? So you might be 17 years old, you're coming out of high school, and you're going to make that decision about a career path. And I think some of it is, again, as I mentioned earlier, trying to engage employers in that high school process more actively. Because, like you said, it's not going to be, I'm going to take a job and then I'm just going to be on that path for the rest of my life. I think that's one way to create expectations both for the employer and for the employee about what the world of work is going to be. I think the other part of it is, in the education system, and I think, we need to probably talk more about education and workforce together. One of the limitations I see, and I was formerly a member of our Workforce Development Corporation board here, is the workforce system is heavily regulated, right? It has enormous restrictions on it, largely from the federal government because of the flow of dollars. And the workforce system, in many ways, is set up to be reactive. It's set up to, when someone loses a job, how can we help them, retrain them, reskill them, reposition them? And I don't really know the answer to this because I don't work in the workforce world, but between the amount we invest in education and the amount we invest in the workforce system, we should be trying to get more ahead of that curve. As you suggested, how do we prepare those people more? I think some of the things you talked about in terms of connecting high school and community college experiences, connecting employers more into those experiences, focusing on a mix of skill sets so that there are technical skills that somebody's going to have when they come out of that experience, in addition to the work readiness and the writing and the maturity skills. So I'm not sure there's one answer, but I think between the resources we put into both education and workforce, aligning those two sectors would seem to make a lot more sense.
Going forward is to get workforce, and a solid workforce is what employers are really looking for.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Stats?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And John, thank you for your time. And I echo others up here saying that your testimony has been very valuable this morning. And I think it's very clear that we need to focus on career and technical education to address that lack of tech talent. And I guess I'm curious, what else do you think that we could or should focus on as legislators in an effort to promote business development in the Southeast and then throughout the Commonwealth?
Again, I think that continuing to think about how we deliver that technical education to people, high school through higher ed. I've been a big proponent, particularly in our higher ed sector in Pennsylvania, both with our public colleges and our private colleges. We have some really elite institutions, right? I mentioned some of them in my testimony. We've done some work with Penn State. It's kind of interesting that Penn State doesn't have a campus in Philadelphia, right? I love Penn State, right? So I'll come back and talk to Kerry about this. Largest alumni association in the world, right? What city are there more alumni in the world than any other city? Philadelphia. We've been working with Penn State over the last decade. They've been growing a graduate engineering and research campus at the Navy Yard. So when you saw Urban Outfitters down there, the Commonwealth has invested in new facilities for them. I'd love to see us grow programs with people like Penn State, with Carnegie Mellon, with Penn and Drexel, where the campus boundary really only matters to the institution, right? But if Carnegie Mellon has a great program in artificial intelligence, how do we get that out to different parts of the Commonwealth so that it can access employers and talent in different ways? If the University of Pennsylvania has a great program here in cell and gene therapy, how do we make sure that that knowledge and that expertise is exchanged around the Commonwealth? Higher ed tends to be kind of a siloed sector.
Yep.
And I think through technology and through policy support, the idea of thinking about greater collaboration among this really elite set of institutions that are in our Commonwealth, and they're all good partners in the communities that they're in, maybe there are opportunities to encourage some of that growth as well.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And by the way, I'm responsible for 2 students that graduated and stayed within the region. So we're part of that 60%. As a matter of fact, they're recent graduates, so we might have gone up a little bit.
All right,
Very
that's
good.
great.
Thank you.
You for your contribution.
Mr. Grady, we have one last question, and that would be from Representative Jones.
Thank you very much. This has been, I echo everybody's sentiments, very, very good and helpful. I have a question, but I want to start by kind of planting a seed, because on the education side, I don't want to, we've sort of covered workforce and education, so I won't ask any more questions about that. But you said a couple things that I think bear repeating, and that is, and I love, my brother's a kindergarten teacher, and I know there's a lot of good programs like we saw at Temple with the entrepreneurship. There's certainly good work being done within many of these institutions, be it the high school level or the colleges. But they are, as you said, very big organizations. They are very siloed, okay? In some cases, I would say insulated. And they are By definition, they are populated with people who have had a good 4-year or 6 or 8 or 12-year college experience. They are inherently biased toward that. That's the product they offer. Okay. You talked about a marketing program earlier, about talking about the strengths of Philadelphia in this case or whatnot. I would maybe just plant the seed that who we need to market to are parents and to high school students, because if we create the workforce, they will come, which is what you're, okay, so it's not just about, you don't need to tell the employer, I mean, we need to tell them, don't get me wrong, but it's not just, and Philly does have an image problem, I agree, so there's an aspect there, but we have to create the talent, and you're gonna have to go around the universities, I would suggest, not through them, okay, because it's inherently counter to what they offer, okay, when they talk about we need 5 years to roll out a curriculum, then you are a dinosaur, yet they don't recognize they're a dinosaur. I would suggest that if we simply share some information, like if you major in whoever you want to pick on, let's pick on art or communications or something, you're going to have $80,000 in debt. You'll be lucky to make $30,000 a year. Okay, you've got a 25% chance you'll never find a job. And oh, by the way, you're below average on your SAT, so you have a 60% chance that you'll never graduate. Simply inform them, okay? And if we start marketing to parents and students to show them some of this data, that this is what companies are hiring. Okay, you're exactly right. I saw this previous. We would hire industrial engineers. We started competing with the banks because they realized industrial engineers are better analytically than finance majors. Okay, so wake up in the finance department and create more analytical talent. Okay, so I think if you market to students and parents, I just want to, you see what I'm saying, and say this is where the opportunity. With that said, my question on a totally different topic, in the Amazon or others, how big of an issue, you haven't talked at all about the tax. So from a strategic perspective, we hear about, obviously the large corporate net income tax, maybe not so much with Amazon, but you look at manufacturers and where they have profit centers here, or distributors or whatnot. What kind of feedback have you gotten on our tax just policy in general as a competitive or non-competitive, an advantage or disadvantage?
A lot of the perspective on tax is driven by sector, right? As you suggested, because people are taxed differently based upon what they're doing. So we still see sectors where the state income tax, the state corporate tax and the state income tax are barriers. So if somebody's looking at being in a state of Washington or Texas, fast-growing states where there's no state income tax or no state corporate net income tax, that's a huge disadvantage. There are other sectors, like when we were dealing with Amazon, where Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, because we're competing against Washington, New York, Boston, California, those are much more expensive places to do business. So as talent aggregates in those expensive places, there's actually an opportunity for us to position Philadelphia and the region and the Commonwealth as a low-cost alternative. We're starting to see some of this. Because of the change at the federal level around the deduction of state and local income taxes and property taxes, places like New Jersey and New York, which are major competitors for us here in the region, are becoming really, they've always been expensive, now they're becoming really expensive, right? So in Bucks County, you're seeing a lot of folks saying, wait a second, I can be across the bridge there, and instead of a 9% state tax, I'm going down to a 3% tax. That's huge, because I can't get that deduction at the federal level anymore. And I think for the Commonwealth, from a marketing perspective, to really understand that change and to see in what sectors it has traction is going to be a worthwhile marketing exercise.
A quick follow-up. So fair to say to some companies, depending on what you're trying to locate here, they certainly get that corporate net income tax has got to catch their attention, right? Or at least for a lot of folks. Relative to companies looking to invest here, not so much what an existing company, but does combined reporting ever show up on their radar screen, or do they not even think about that?
I think that's more of an issue for businesses that are here and that struggle with it. And that as they grow, I worry that we're losing jobs to other places because they find that it's hard to manage. I think that's probably our biggest experience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. We really appreciate your gracious time and your willingness to answer our many, many questions.
Yeah,
so thank you. We're going to move now to the second panel. I am pleased to welcome David Taylor, President and CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, and Matt Cabri, the Executive Director of the Select Greater Philadelphia. And while we're transitioning, it's my pleasure to welcome Chris Quinn, representative very close to here, Delaware County.
Okay. Well, thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm David Taylor. I'm the President and CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. We are the century-old statewide not-for-profit trade organization representing the people who make things in Pennsylvania. Manufacturing is the engine that drives Pennsylvania's economy, adding $87 billion worth of value to our gross state product year over year, directly employing over 500,000 Pennsylvanians on the plant floor, but that core manufacturing activity sustains millions of additional Pennsylvania jobs in supply chains, distribution networks, vendors of industrial services. Our mission is competitiveness. We are a statewide group. We are based in Harrisburg. We want to make it the smart business decision for people to choose to invest and hire and locate and expand here in Pennsylvania rather than in one of our competitor states or overseas. And again, that competitive differential is the direct result of state public policy. So these are issues that really can only be properly addressed in Harrisburg. My testimony is very detailed, and mercifully, I am not going to read it all to you. I'm just going to give you an overview of the points, and there's more supporting detail in what we submitted in writing. First of all, I would say it's important to benchmark Pennsylvania against the high-performing states. As was mentioned in the previous panel, New York and New Jersey, Albany and Trenton are in the process of doing things to foul things up there worse. So, if our criteria is, are we slightly less bad than New York and New Jersey, and if so, we're okay, then that very low standard we meet. But that's not going to get Pennsylvania where we want to go. So we need to benchmark against Indiana and North Carolina and Georgia and Texas and other high-performing states. So to give an overview, our portfolio at PMA, the issues that we address day by day to improve competitiveness, they fall into 5 categories. There are 5 points on the star. Number 1 is spending restraint, that when government grows faster than the private sector, it suffocates the economy, and as a result, we have growth that is below the national average. And that has been the case in Pennsylvania year after year, decade after decade. And so, again, there are many answers that they're simple, but they're not easy. And that the simple principle that we need to follow is we need to match expenditures to revenues and not the other way around. So the first point on the star is spending restraint. The second is that we need to have pro-growth business tax relief. Pennsylvania's business taxes are very high, our structure is not competitive, and that we need tax relief to be as important to the General Assembly and our decision makers in Harrisburg as new spending. And especially I want to point to the Achilles heel, which is our cap on the carry forward of net operating losses. And I know that this sounds like sort of like a Baroque detail, but in fact, this is critical if we are going to achieve what was mentioned by the previous speaker, which is to commercialize the gains from our institutions of higher learning and our advanced research and their partnerships with the private sector. Under the IRS code and tax law in 48 states, a business can apply all of its recent business losses against its current and near future tax liability. Pennsylvania has a very low startup rate for small business, and that its new businesses that are coming into existence that need to make use of that provision of the tax code. That inevitably, when you have a startup, there are initial losses, and the ability to apply those losses against your profits when you actually wind up in the black is very critical. Businesses are not going to invest startup capital in one of the only places in America where they cannot apply those losses against when they finally get profitable. So again, if we want to live in a world where we are able to achieve those kinds of startups and innovations and take these breakthroughs in R&D from our institutions of higher learning, we need to uncap the NOL. The third thing is regulatory relief. And again, no one is saying that there shouldn't be rules. Of course there should be rules, but those rules should be based on sound science. They should be subject to some kind of independent cost-benefit analysis, and that they should be reviewed systematically so that we know that they're still achieving the goals that they were enacted for. And again, the public good that results from regulation is compliance. When people follow those rules, that is the good that society enjoys, and therefore we need our regulatory bodies to be partners in compliance rather than playing gotcha or racking up fines, those sorts of things. Also in the regulatory space, we need government to move at the speed of business. 4, lawsuit abuse. Philadelphia may be America's lawsuit abuse capital, and I can go on at some length about that. In the United States, this is a very American problem, that our court system consumes a full 2% of our gross national product. And again, nobody is saying that number should be 0. Of course, we need to have a court system, we need to have a judiciary to enforce people's rights, to enforce contracts, all those things. But in the average of all of our international competitors, the advanced industrial nations, there's no nation that has a court system that costs as much as 1% of their gross national product. So when the US rate is more than double the average of our competitors, that we know that we have a problem. I would also point to, as I'm sure the legislators are aware, that there is an attack that is underway by the litigation industry against reforms that were enacted to arrest a medical malpractice crisis that was crippling Pennsylvania. This was back at the turn of the century. I was there at PMA for all of this, so I remember it, and it was very real, and it was a direct threat to the quality of life of the residents of Philadelphia and southeastern Pennsylvania. Hospitals were laying off doctors, that departments were being closed. And so I would say, especially as we're talking about the importance of the life sciences and healthcare to the prosperity of southeastern Pennsylvania, that those are industries we must not allow that medical malpractice crisis to be resurrected. And so this brings me to the 5th point, which is the workforce. And this is where I want to spend most of my time here before I hand things over. Workforce is the #1 challenge facing employers today. There's no question. Because of the relief that we have had at the federal level on business taxes and regulations, that the challenge of finding a sufficient number of qualified new hires is the #1 challenge facing the manufacturing sector. And I just want to go through a couple of points on this. First of all, I would direct you to the audit that was recently conducted by the Auditor General of Pennsylvania's workforce development job training system. It is a tangle. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And as the Auditor General says, while he didn't find anything illegal, he did in fact put on display a system that is dysfunctional, inefficient, and ineffective. One of the things that we can do, because this is dozens of programs that's fragmented across multiple cabinet departments, there's state and federal taxpayer money involved, which means that there are federal rules that have to be followed. If the administration were to request a waiver from the federal government, it would enable us to move money between silos, to rationalize the system. And we're talking about, the last time I checked, these programs totaled over $1.6 billion. I'm sure it's higher than that now. So what we're talking about is potentially hundreds of millions of dollars worth of efficiencies that could be gained. So this wouldn't require an additional expenditures, but rather we can take what's already being spent and reallocate it so that it makes sense. In Indiana, they have petitioned for such a waiver. They have successfully received that waiver, and they're in the process of actually doing this work, so I would point you to that. One of the issues that dealing with the workforce is corrections reform. And so I wanted to thank you members and the other members of the General Assembly for tackling this issue, that we need to connect, those citizens who have paid their debt to society, to direct them towards a productive future, make sure that they have the ability to rejoin the workforce, to regain the dignity of work, and again, that this is critically important to prevent recidivism. And I think I want to thank Governor Wolf, that my friend Secretary Wetzel, who began his efforts under Governor Corbett, that Governor Wolf, to his great credit, retained Secretary Wetzel. And so Pennsylvania is fortunate to have a key leader working in this area, and I would ask you to support him. I would also point you to, there's a number of, along with the very high-performing world-class institutions that were mentioned in the previous panel, talking about the University of Pennsylvania, talking about Carnegie Mellon University. We also have some really great institutions in Pennsylvania with the skilled trades and preparing people for work in manufacturing. Representative Quinn, the Williamson College of the Trades is one of those very fine institutions. Thaddeus Stevens in Lancaster, Penn College in Williamsport. These are great Pennsylvania institutions. I was very pleased to see that in the most recent budget that more resources were dedicated to those institutions, and they're worthy of our support. In the same way, I think there's a great opportunity with reinventing the state system of higher education, that we have seen that a number of those campuses having problems filling their classrooms, and that because of this mismatch between the skills that are being imparted and the skills that the economy is demanding, that is an area where I believe that the Commonwealth can make progress on addressing this issue. We need to have excellence in public education. The resources that are deployed by the taxpayers in support of our public K through 12 in Pennsylvania are pretty considerable. And, sadly, too often that our students do not receive the kind of challenging, rigorous, and meaningful experience that they require to succeed in life and succeed in the workplace. So it's for this reason that the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association has for many years supported education reform, school choice, the Education Improvement Tax Credit Scholarship Program, and charter schools. Now, my own daughter, who's in 4th grade, that she attends our local public school because I think it's a pretty good school, and I believe that she's having a good experience there. If that would change, I would take her to a different school. My wife and I have the means to do that. There are many students, many families that don't have the means to move to a better district or to pay twice with their local taxes and then to pay private school tuition. And so this is why charter schools are a very important vehicle for reform. And one of the ways that I serve in the community as a volunteer is through a school, as a school board member of one of Pennsylvania's virtual charter schools, that we have a STEM focus. It's the Reach Cyber Charter School. We have over 3,000 students enrolled, including 573 students from here in the city of Philadelphia. I had the privilege of being the commencement speaker back in June at our first graduation ceremony. And if you want to, talk about the great diversity of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, all 67 counties, I got to witness that. And, we had kids from all over, from every walk of life, from every community here in Pennsylvania. But the one thing that all of those kids had in common was they needed something different than what was on offer at the local zip code-based public school. I mean, I'm often reminded of the words of Mark Twain, who said, I always tried to make sure that my schooling didn't interfere with my education. And again, the governor's attack on charter schools, to me, is deeply disheartening and should be resisted in any way. I can go on that at great length, but I want to get through the last of my points and not use too much time. regarding the workforce, the one additional thing that I want to make mention of is the issue of recreational marijuana. That for manufacturers who operate an industrial environment, there are a lot of very consequential things that go on. That we have heavy equipment, bladed instruments, extreme temperatures, chemical reactions, high voltage. There are a lot of very, very consequential things that happen on a plant floor, and for that reason, because we have a very, of course, profound moral obligation to our incumbent workforce, and beyond that, we have very significant legal and fiduciary responsibilities. All of our licenses and insurances and permits are predicated on operating a safe workplace. For that reason, we have to have a sober workforce. And again, this is not just me. If you go to wolfhomeproducts.com/careers, you will see that Governor Wolf's family business in York requires drug tests before someone can be hired to work at that particular employer. So along with the crisis that we have with the workforce, that the pool of potential new hires, which is not big enough to begin with, that once you tell those folks that they are going to have to take a drug test, that either they take the test and fail it, or they abandon their application. And so we lose between like a quarter to a third of that pool. Again, I don't come to you saying that I have the answer, but I do know that one thing that we shouldn't do is make a bad situation worse. That inevitably, with the legalization and mass commercialization of recreational marijuana, you are going to increase use, you are going to reduce that pool, and you're going to put further strains on our economy. So, spending restraint, pro-growth tax relief, regulatory reform, limits on lawsuit abuse, building out the workforce, those are the issues that Pennsylvania needs to address to be competitive. I wish I could say that there was one silver bullet, but in fact that it's a spectrum of things, and we've got to make progress in all of these areas to get where we want to go. But the point that I want to close on is that I often joke that the foundational fact of Pennsylvania is that the king did not know what was over here when he gave the land grant to the Penns. And so Pennsylvania geographically doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but this is the die that history has cast for us. And that Susquehanna County and Greene County, may be a long way from here, but at the same time, our lawmakers in Harrisburg, from all 67 counties, when you assume this distinguished office, you're making policy for all 13 million Pennsylvanians. And so we all have to be invested in our neighbors, whether they're the neighbor next door or they're the neighbor in another part of the Commonwealth. And for that reason, I'm very glad to be here in Pennsylvania's greatest city, that the Commonwealth cannot thrive if this great city and this region don't thrive. So it's a privilege to be here, and thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and have Matt Cabri also give his testimony, and then we'll open it for questions.
Great. I have a couple prepared comments that I'll share, and we can go from there. So good morning, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to share insights and suggestions as it relates to attracting new businesses and jobs to Pennsylvania. My name's Matt Cabri, and I lead a group called Select Greater Philadelphia. We are a council of our Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia. Founded 15 years ago, Select is the business attraction organization for the 11-county region of northern Delaware, southern New Jersey, and southeastern Pennsylvania. I can provide some additional insight on that if you like. We're a nonprofit entity funded by primarily academic and business organizations, and we're focused on highlighting Greater Philadelphia's unique business assets to a national and a global audience, but also to a regional audience, with the ultimate goal of growing the economic vibrancy of our collective community by attracting new businesses and new jobs to our Greater Philadelphia neighborhood. We at Select believe that when we work, think, and act as a unified, collaborative community across our Commonwealth and across our region, that we're stronger, and we have a more compelling and attractive message to communicate with business leaders and decision makers from around the world. At the core of our approach, it's storytelling. We tell the story of the incredible business assets across our community: talent, transportation infrastructure, quality of life, cost of living, cost of doing business, access to quality education from kindergarten to high school and beyond. You know, in the region, there are almost 2,500 K through 12 schools that families can choose from. It's a real distinguishing characteristic that comes up frequently in our conversations as we attract new businesses here. We do work very closely with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's Department of Community and Economic Development, both the Office of International Business Development and the Governor's Action Team, as well as with each of the economic development teams in the 5 counties of southeastern Pennsylvania to promote the region and to welcome new businesses. More specifically, key to our work and our success is the cooperative and collaborative engagements we have with each of the counties in southeastern Pennsylvania, and especially here in the city of Philadelphia with our Department of Commerce and the team at PIDC, as well as our colleagues at PHL CVB and Visit Philadelphia. Now, specifically, Select Greater Philadelphia, we market the region's business assets through paid, earned, and what we call owned media. And we cultivate relationships at the national and international level at conferences and trade shows through speaking engagements. We also organize and lead tours, provide data and information, and we make connections for our guests and our prospective businesses with experts in the region, those folks who can help close the project, close the sale for us, to bring it to our community. In short, we serve as the marketers of the business story in our region and as the navigators who are ultimately helping businesses and their leaders make the most informed choice about why this region is the perfect fit to expand and grow a business and a career. Now, some quick examples of our alignment with the team at Pennsylvania's DCED operation include, but certainly aren't limited to, because we're very opportunistic and we adjust quickly as the opportunity presents itself. But we've coordinated the regional program and the schedule of visits with OIBD for the Commonwealth's in-country consultants. You may know better than most that there are, I believe, about 20 representatives in different countries around the world who are promoting Pennsylvania. When they come to visit Pennsylvania, we here at Select help coordinate that story and those connections across the region. We also serve as the lead generator, so we bring projects to GAT and OIBD to help close that sale. And we also serve as the regional partner for meetings and tours when DCED generates the lead, and they bring it to us to help tell the story about our region. We also partner on regional marketing initiatives and marketing missions and conferences, including IAMC, Select USA, the International Plastic Showcase, and recent business attraction marketing mission trips to Europe, organized with DCED's OIBD team, as well as leveraging opportunities that are made available through regional initiatives, such as, for example, tours implemented by the Philadelphia Orchestra Association when they travel the world. We piggyback with them to help showcase the region and use it as an asset to do that. We're also serving as one of the partners in the Engage program, where we're listening to the challenges and opportunities that are shared by businesses in Philadelphia County and offering insight and guidance to help those businesses overcome hurdles. It's a great information tool for the team at DCED as well. Now, our active engagement with DCED and with each of the economic development teams in Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Montgomery, and Philadelphia counties to showcase our region is in an effort to bring new businesses and new jobs to southeastern Pennsylvania. It's really highly valued by our team. We need this work to continue to deliver on our mission and to grow the economic vitality of southeastern Pennsylvania and the Commonwealth overall. Couple pieces of feedback. We hear from businesses in the region, generally it's very positive, though each county has its nuances and opportunities specific to that community. We also hear feedback from guests who are visiting the region, business leaders and site consultants and real estate professionals. That feedback is more of a, wow, we didn't realize that southeastern Pennsylvania has so much to offer, and it's such a great place to establish, work, and live and raise a family. They're generally surprised, as you heard in previous testimony, because the perception is not aligned with the reality of our business and quality of life assets. So we need to continue to close that gap between the misperception and the reality by investing more in the efforts of Select and the county teams, as well as the Commonwealth overall, to market Pennsylvania to a national and global audience as a place not just to visit, but to also establish and grow a business and a career, and the place to innovate, create, educate, prosper, and raise a family. At the state level, here are a couple ways we can continue to improve on the business attraction, marketing, and job creation work that our team at Select and other like-minded organizations focus on every day. The first, let's continue to create a business-friendly environment by minimizing or eliminating restrictive regulations, while at the same time further developing and promoting Pennsylvania as a welcoming place to establish and grow a business and a career. At the very least, let's not give companies, innovators, entrepreneurs, and job seekers any reason to leave the Commonwealth. Let's invest in targeted business attraction campaigns that are supported by the public and private sectors, essentially delivering a win for everybody involved. This can and should be industry-specific initiatives that align with skills and strengths of Pennsylvania. Two quick examples. Bio 2019, hosted here in Philadelphia, we did a joint effort where we had marketing campaigns, and we did a similar one in 2018, that was hosted in Boston to attract awareness and business to Pennsylvania. Let's also create a dedicated funding source to support business attraction efforts. Similar to the success that we've realized by investing in tourism and meeting and convention attraction, a dedicated vehicle to fund business attraction marketing will produce similar positive outcomes that we have seen over the years with tourism and conventions coming and returning to the Commonwealth. And let's think differently. Let's consider new ways to transform Pennsylvania into a technology and innovation leader that retains and attracts companies, talent, and investment to all corners of the Commonwealth, from smaller towns that are desperate to find a new beginning, to large urban areas that are simultaneously thriving and wrestling with social services challenges. So I not only applaud this Pennsylvania House of Representatives Majority Policy Committee for inviting these ideas and insights in support of your collective efforts to enhance the business environment across the Commonwealth, but my colleagues and I at Select Greater Philadelphia and our Chamber of Commerce, we look forward to working with you to further develop and implement ideas and policies that deliver winning outcomes as it relates to marketing our state's business assets and attracting new businesses and jobs to our communities across Pennsylvania. Working together to bring new companies to our communities will infuse a new economic vibrancy across the Commonwealth. I want to add a couple side notes that complement some of the other comments that were shared earlier. One of the tactics that we implemented at Select Greater Philadelphia to help create awareness of our talent and our region overall is a television program and a podcast. We partner with NBC 10 on a television program called Growing Greater Philadelphia. It's a quarterly 30-minute program that airs Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. They preempt the nationally syndicated program. Next one's coming up in October. We've had 7 30-minute programs. We've also had over 165 podcasts, stories of businesses large and small, successful leaders at large organizations like Penn and Independence, and small startups like Leah Diagnostics and Alevi and Group K Diagnostics. So we hear lots of different stories, and one that just came up that ties into talent that I want us to all appreciate. There's a couple. We interviewed an older company that specializes in masonry repair, and the technology that they're incorporating today is different than what they've ever done before. They used to have a talented professional scale a wall on a building facade to determine what repair needed to happen. They don't do that anymore. They use a drone. And the drone can provide much clearer and better access that allows them to provide excellent service for that customer when repairing the facade of that building. Just a couple weeks ago, we had a chance to visit with the team out at the Downingtown Area School District. I think you all may be aware that Downingtown had implemented a nationally recognized and award-winning STEM education program at the STEM Academy. They've recently introduced in the past year something they call the Mobile Innovation Lab. For those of us who may recall the Magic School Bus, it's essentially what it is. It's a really cool initiative where an elementary school teacher became certified with a commercial driver's license. The team rallied and they converted a bus into a mobile lab, and she is now bringing STEM education topics to kindergarten through 5th graders across the 11 elementary schools every week at Downingtown Area School District. My point is they're training the workforce of tomorrow. And I just want to touch on 2 other quick things. Jefferson Institute of Bioprocessing, Montgomery County Springhouse, old Roman Haas facility, converted into a new facility. And the Wistar Institute has a very unique program with the Community College of Philadelphia. I point both of these out because the JIB, the Jefferson Institute, is partnering with Bucks County Community College, Montgomery County Community College, Delaware County Community College to provide programs that are not traditional four-year college degrees. And I think that's an important topic. It was brought up in some of the conversation earlier. The future workforce is not necessarily a 4, 6, or 8-year college degree program, and we need to continue to invest in that for the future. That's what we're hearing from the workforce, from the employers who are seeking a workforce for tomorrow. It was mentioned about our great universities that are churning out engineers. Totally true. The reason companies are giving out business cards in such an efficient manner is because there's not enough engineers. So it's a very competitive environment, and engineers are jumping from one firm to another. We were just with the great team at Pannoni, 53 years in Greater Philadelphia, and they struggle with this challenge as well. They're adapting their workforce and environment and their engagement in the community to meet the needs and interests of their millennial audience that are now joining them. So my point is, it doesn't all have to be college trained for the workforce of tomorrow. So with that, I'll pause and thank you for this opportunity. Happy to offer additional insights today and beyond today as well in the future as you think about some winning next steps.
Wonderful. Thank you both for your testimony, your willingness to be with us. I know that we're going to have some questions and concerns. I'm going to just kick it off with two things. We had the opportunity as a policy committee to visit Wistar and witness their coordination with the Community College of Philadelphia. Outstanding stuff. We did that earlier in the year. We're seeing that modeled in different ways across the Commonwealth because employers are becoming innovative in how they find new employees. So thank you very much for sharing that. Thank you also, David, for your comments regarding the venue shopping. The Majority Policy Committee has been out front on that from the beginning. We also believe that any revision to the law change would be detrimental to our Commonwealth. And your comment about recreational marijuana. Personally, I don't believe we have our arms completely around medical marijuana, let alone recreational marijuana, and we've heard it repeated regardless of what manufacturer, retail, you name it, it's very concerning for all of our employers. And then lastly, and I'll turn it over to someone else, you spoke about tax reform, business tax relief. You spoke specifically about the NOI. We hear repeatedly the C&I is an issue, and then less often I'm approached on the 1031 exchange. Do you hear about those two tax issues?
Yes, and they're all, the NOL cap and the very high C&I rate are in fact related. That the cap on the NOL makes the very high C&I rate worse.
Okay.
In terms, so my recommendation would be, prioritize, because all these things, again, there's no question, all these things are going to be expensive to fix, but we need to address them. It's a heavy lift, but we've got to get over it because this is directly affecting our competitiveness, our small business startup rate, because the important thing about that rate is that we need it to be higher because, of course, not all small businesses succeed. But we need people to be willing to take those kinds of risks, to start a venture, because some of them will succeed, grow, and become the major employers of the future. The like-kind exchange is another really extreme outlier in Pennsylvania tax policy. And what that means is that I really think this is a 49-state issue, that Pennsylvania is the only one, or one of a precious few. So in most states, when a business is trying to expand, for example, that they have outgrown the building where they're operating and they need to get a bigger facility, that the state government will say, we recognize that you're just getting rid of one thing to get something else that is like it, and that therefore we are not going to tax that transaction. that we're not, because of course by taxing the transaction when you're just exchanging things that are alike, it makes that leap more expensive and therefore more difficult. It's a very important reform. That's one of the issues that our friends at NFIB are working on. I don't happen to know the fiscal note on that directly, but it's the sort of thing where we need to start by identifying those things that are extreme outliers and let's remedy them first and sort of work our way in.
Representative Quinn.
David, first I want to say thank you for being here. And for me, as I listen to your testimony, we're always focused on jobs, taxes, etc. But I wanted to hone in for a second on areas like Pennsylvania College of Technology, Thaddeus Stevens. As legislators, we hear about waiting lists for some of these institutions, and students are students not getting into the right programs? Help me better understand.
Well,
where we're at
we have a crisis of I don't want to say values exactly, but it's a cultural issue that is larger than just just our policy making decisions. Where because parents want the next generation to be better. They want the world to be better for their kids than it was for themselves, and for a generation or more, that people have been sold on that notion of you got to go to college. College is the way to go. College opens the door, and it has, I think, inadvertently led to a world where we do not value all kinds of work. And in fact, there are really great careers, high-paying jobs that are waiting in the skilled trades and manufacturing. And it's funny. I was giving this whole patter to a journalist who you would know, who shot back at me and said, "Oh, so Meredith's going to be a welder." And Meredith is my little girl who's about to turn 10. And the snobbery behind that wisecrack. And I said to him, "Look, I want my little girl to have the best future that she can have. I want her to be her true self. And if she has an impulse to go off into one of these fields, so much the better for her." We need to attack that attitude on two fronts. I guess first to say that we all benefit. We all benefit from our very high and ever-rising standard of living in America, and that this standard of living is brought to us by many, many different systems of delivery, and that those systems in many instances are invisible because all these things were designed to make it easy for us, but we go home and we flick the light switch and we think we turned the lights on, when all we did was we closed a circuit that was wired by an electrician who worked on that in our house using materials that were manufactured at a factory by manufacturing workers, that connect your home to the electric lines that were hung by the linemen, that connect you to the power plant that was built with concrete that was mined from aggregates, and so on and so on and so on. We need to have a society that honors all of those different contributions that people make to our economy and our society. And then additionally, we need to point out those are really high-paying jobs. To go to Williamson, I was there it was on recruitment day, and to see over 100 employers from all across the Eastern Seaboard who came to media to be there to pitch for those, again, you're only talking, the graduating class of, many dozens of students, but I think it's less than 100. But the value that those young men can bring because of the skill sets that are imparted at that institution, it's life-changing for them. They're headed off to really good futures. And if we had more capacity through those kinds of institutions, more young people would be able to succeed in that way.
Chris, I know that question was directed to David, but if you don't mind me offering a perspective that, one, we hear from different folks who are both investors of Select Greater Philadelphia's work and through the podcast and other initiatives. General Building Contractors Association, the Association of Builders and Contractors of Eastern Pennsylvania and nationally, they all have apprenticeship programs. They're all desperate to cultivate a pipeline of talent. And some of them are making really great inroads. One of the things I learned that surprised me, in addition to the Williamson School of Free Trade and others like it, is Temple, Villanova, Drexel. They all have construction management programs that are non-traditional college degreed programs. And most people don't know about it. And I think we need to do a better job of raising awareness.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate it. I think that goes back to both of your comments. Simply, how do we begin to work with our career resource centers inside of our local high schools to begin to channel kids into the right program so that they can blossom and become, contributing members of our society.
And a big part of that, we need our local school districts to make that connection. The challenge for us as manufacturers is that in most cases, manufacturing is something that happens in a pole building in an industrial park on the edge of town. And unless you have a reason to go through those doors to see the technology that's being deployed, the value that's being added, which is really amazing in most instances, unless you have a reason to go there to see that, you don't even know that it's there. And so in that way, because we don't have our local school buildings and the school leaders connecting with the local employers and having that exchange of information and making it vivid by being there in the first person, there's no thought that's given to how can we at our local school help to make sure that our young people who are right here, right now, that if they want, that those young people would have the ability to succeed at that workplace across town.
Wow. Thank you. I did want to follow up with one completely different topic, a separate question altogether. And it's my district, people are pretty well off. Minimum wage isn't typically an issue that we're concerned about. But as you represented, I'm also representing the 67 counties across Pennsylvania. And when I look at this issue, I struggle with it because I'm looking at all of Pennsylvania. How would an increase in the minimum wage affect, say, rural Pennsylvania and some of the smaller towns and communities? Can you speak to that?
Well, I'll try. I mean, in general, we believe that that the market should dictate wages and that government intervention is usually counterproductive. One of the things that I would point to is that, we talk about work ethic. And again, I think that this is an unintended consequence, but I think the consequence is real. Because, again, when I was 15, I was at the McDonald's as a burger flipper, and I was making minimum wage, and I'm sure that I absolutely was not worth whatever I was being paid at that point in time. But it was an important formative experience for me. It was my first contact with the workplace where my parents aren't there, I'm on my own, I gotta follow instructions, I gotta meet goals, I'm gonna get yelled at, all those things. And that fewer and fewer younger people are having that experience anymore, of having that job as a teenager where you are, scooping ice cream or delivering newspapers or whatever. I believe that part of that is that the government mandated wage is making that cost greater to employers than the value that an unskilled person can bring to that job. And so as a result, we are delaying further and further in time that first contact that an individual has with the private workforce. And so as a result, I guess the euphemism they use is attachment to the workforce, which means like, what is the likelihood that you're going to get out of bed to go to a job if you have one, or get out of bed to look for a job if you don't? And that this is a societal crisis where that connection to the workforce, that inner discipline, is less and less. And I believe that at least in part that is due to fewer opportunities for younger people, and that part of that is because we're pricing these jobs out of existence. So anyway, that's a long way to get around to your answer, but I think that we need to be very cautious about government intervening in the wage market.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative Thomas?
Hi. First, I wanted to say, just make a comment on we've had a lot of talk for years about career and technical educations and schools preparing people. And I do think society is changing its opinion of that. And part of it is that all of those jobs, that welder, is going to have to understand computer software. Every job of the future is going to be computer integrated. And I'd like to make sure that we as legislators we begin to focus not just on career and technical, which is the need today, but what I believe will be the need in 5 years, which means all of those jobs are going to have a what I would call, because I'm old, computer aspect to them, some kind of technical ability, etc. And I think that's helped society change their view of those jobs. My question is, and I was going to ask John, but we grilled him long enough, but Matt and David, if you want to chime in, I would love to understand what the talent pool is looking for as far as where do I want to live? I heard urban. I have 3 children from 27 to 29, so they're right in that. They want to live in cities, they want certain of those things. But we as a state of Pennsylvania, what can we do as legislators to make Pennsylvania a place that our young people, because while Philadelphia may be growing, as a state, we are not keeping these people at this age. The only growing population in the state of Pennsylvania is 85 plus. So what can we do as legislators to create an environment where people want to stay in the state? What are you hearing? What does the town pool want?
Okay.
Well, okay, I'll take a first stab at that, and the brief answer to start with is I don't know. Recognizing that, I really do think that it comes back again to the economic fundamentals of Pennsylvania, of earning the investment of employers, to say it's the smart business decision to come here, and then where do I locate and where will it be most pleasing for my employees, because the world really has changed, and the fundamental change is, whereas forever it was always that there were more people looking for work than there were jobs available. That is over. That is over. And so now employers have to be focused on their workforce, and how do we take care of our people? How do we take care of our people in many different ways? Pennsylvania is blessed with geographic diversity, with natural resources, and depending on how someone chooses to structure their business. This was the first I had heard about Vanguard setting up an urban campus to say, well, some significant percentage of our employees want to live in that kind of, bustling urban kind of setting, and therefore, okay, we as a business are going to adjust for that purpose. It's probably blasphemy to talk about Pittsburgh here, but I mean, one of the things that's neat about Pittsburgh is that depending on, where you are relative to the Golden Triangle downtown, you can live an urban lifestyle, a suburban lifestyle, an exurban or rural lifestyle, because again, the river valleys lead off into all different kinds of directions. So I would say if we fix the fundamentals first, then Pennsylvania, because of our inherent qualities, that employers will figure out how to respond to that, to say, where do we want to site our businesses? How do we want to operate our business to make sure that we're doing things in a way that are pleasing to our employees, so that we can retain those employees?
Wendy, I would add in a little bit more, let me just say, opportunity and affordability. That's how I capture the spirit of this without being overly simplistic. I
think that's true.
We hear from young people who are moving here from New York and Washington, D.C., that they can get a job. It's a much more affordable place to live, and it is a bustling, active community. And when I say here, I'm specifically talking about the city of Philadelphia. However, I would suggest that that's happening across the rim, if you will, of the region, whether it's Westchester or King of Prussia or Doylestown. We are hearing that it's jobs and it's the affordability of the community. Just to put a fine point on it, the 3 kids all grew up in a suburban setting. 2 are in the city. 1 would never come into the city, loves the suburban space more. So it's a very subjective situation, and it'll evolve over time, as we know, depending on where someone is in their point in life. Being in an urban environment may not be the right place for them. But more and more we're hearing they don't want to own a car, they walk, they ride their bike, or they take public transportation, or frankly, they're working remotely, so they can be anywhere. And that is adding to their flexibility in terms of affordability. And but really, it comes down, in my mind, to those two things that we hear pretty consistently: opportunity and affordability.
One follow-up question. Do you hear at all that they're looking for more long-term? I mean, I think what we offer is if they want to live in the city, not own a car when they're 25, and they get married and have kids, they want to move, they can stay in the region.
Yeah.
To your point, rural is probably a bit challenging for the Southeast, but we could do suburban and urban pretty well with transportation.
Yeah, we have heard that.
Do they care about that, or do they?
They do, and historically, especially in the city of Philadelphia, we have heard that it's starting to change because at least the brand, the image, the reputation of Philadelphia's public school system is enhanced. And frankly, it's because residents are getting more involved. They're creating things that I think is really cool called, I think it's referred to as PHONE. It's an acronym for Friends of Neighborhood Education.
Oh, I've heard about that.
Yeah. So a young person is getting involved in their local elementary school. They don't even have kids, but they know in 5 years from now they may have kids. And instead of having to relocate and change the investment they made in that community and taking it to another part of the region because of a school district, that they want to make that school better. So that's starting to change, and I think for the better. But yeah, we still hear that every once in a while, that they'll shift to a suburban location based on where they are in their life. Yeah. Yeah. Can you indulge me for 2 more minutes? I didn't want to bring this up, but because Dave did, I thought it would be helpful because it's a real life situation and it applies to marijuana. We are talking with a company right now who's looking to locate operations in southeastern Pennsylvania in the marijuana business. And here's a couple pieces of feedback that may be helpful for your team as you think about this. This is a gentleman who has extensive experience in the growing and processing of tobacco, and he's now shifting that to the marijuana space. He refers to not just Pennsylvania, but generally the space overall as the Wild West. And the lack of regulation and process associated with this needs to be enhanced. And he's waiting for that to happen. And he knows that there are people who are really running roughshod out there, and it's starting to get a little bit more of a crackdown. He's a big fan of research because most of what we know about marijuana's safety and efficacy is unknown, frankly. So I think it's smart that, from my understanding, based on the education this gentleman has given me, that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is investing more in requiring research partnerships for these growers, processors, and even some of the distributors, meaning the dispensaries, at the retail level, to be aligned with one of the 8 research institutions in the Commonwealth. And that competitive process of how this processor is aligning with Penn or Jefferson or Temple to conduct research, first, it's not as well known, and there needs to be more process around that. And second, the regulation, while I know we all say we need less regulation, the reality is regulation is not bad. It's when it's oppressive or restrictive that is the balance here. And this gentleman is waiting for the regulation environment to be enhanced and tightened and frankly enforced, because that's his observation. And I will say directly, and we can talk more offline about this, but whether a hydroponic growing facility ends up in southwest Philadelphia or up in the far northeast of Philadelphia, or in Limerick, Montgomery County, there's actually a dormant growing facility that this gentleman has his eye on, and he's just waiting to take over because it's absolutely perfect for this. And with Pennsylvania's roots being in agriculture, so too are Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey, deep agricultural institutional foundations. Let's get ahead of that in Pennsylvania to maximize that and welcome medicinal marijuana in the way that is regulated and appropriately enforced. Yes, totally.
I do my last question, my quick question?
Yeah.
Very quick. We're really pushing it right to the limit. So
Yeah.
last question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I will make this very brief. I live in Bucks County, and we love the city. My wife and my sons, we come into the city all the time. However, I do have friends and neighbors that hesitate to come in because of Philadelphia being a sanctuary city. So I'm curious, as you try and recruit and even keep businesses in Philadelphia, has that been an obstacle?
No, that's the short answer. And I will tell you, I think it's a generational thing. We have neighbors of ours. I'm in Euclid Township, Chester County is where I live, 29 miles door to door to my office here at the Bellevue. I'll tell you what the pull will be, or could be. It's the young people in the community. If your friends and neighbors have kids who are coming into the city, they often will serve as a conduit to welcome the older generation, if you will, into the city. Quite the opposite in attracting businesses here. They actually look at the city as a hub. They may end up establishing operations outside the city, but we know, and the city also knows, that the economic vibrancy will be lifted even if that business establishes operations somewhere else, because people will live here and dine and entertain here as well. So we don't really hear that as an obstacle.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I would just say that federal environmental law is not optional. Federal civil rights law is not optional. Why federal immigration law would be seen as being optional is just beyond me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. We really appreciate your time. Last but certainly not least, John Elwine, Regional Director of Unisys Public Sector. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to your testimony.
He's a patient man.
Go.
Thank you, Donna.
Yeah. No,
Great, thank you.
whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come today. Appreciate the members' opportunity to have Unisys represented. I'm John Olwine. I serve as the Unisys Regional Director for Public Sector here in Pennsylvania. I've been asked to speak on some of the barriers that we see as an organization, and then I can speak to the public sector business itself directly. Unisys, if you're not aware of the brand that John talked about earlier, we're headquartered in Blue Bell, Pennsylvania. We're deeply rooted in central Pennsylvania and Philadelphia marketplace. In 1945, we were first to collaborate with the University of Pennsylvania to develop the very first publicly offered computer system. We have collaborated with the Commonwealth for over 40 years in a strategic partnership, providing IT services, application development, and providing the systems that protect the most critical assets of the Commonwealth and the computers that serve the Commonwealth, the agencies, the boards and commissions, and the counties. Since 2014, we helped launch the first of its kind private hybrid cloud for the Commonwealth, which changed the way each agency could consume on demand those computing services required. This is transformational in how we bring and have streamlined state operations. We have saved taxpayers millions of dollars through those services in that consolidation. We ensured public safety, and we have protected the citizens' data, which, as you all know through the headlines of today, is reaching the papers every day. Our experience in the Commonwealth has enabled us to appreciate efforts like yours from many administrations to remove the barriers for commercial organizations to deliver services, to build products, and serve the Commonwealth as the globe. Really, it's about, I'll concentrate on three things today, really. It's about the collaboration that we need. It's the transparency that we need. And as John mentioned earlier, the workforce development we need to execute. From a collaboration and communication standpoint, it's critical in any business to have that interaction with the client. And the industry needs to understand the Commonwealth's needs in specific of the business. What business initiative, what challenge are we trying to solve? Many times, as a provider to the Commonwealth, we are given a list of requirements and asked only to look at black and white list of requirements. So we're bound by the success of how that was captured to really what the business needs. All too often, the lack of collaboration in that conversation or the clear communication ability of the team doing it creates additional obstacles. And you have seen, again in the paper, many of the Commonwealth's large projects not go as planned, run over budget, and creates consternation. This is for many complex and simple projects that happen every day within the Commonwealth. As a Commonwealth leadership team that sets policy agenda, we believe you should request input and feedback from all forms of the business of those potential policies about to go into place. Again, like a commission today, we have insights we can lend to that. What are the additional obstacles? What are some of the challenges you might face? By that agenda, what happens? What's the cause and effect? So we, myself and our peers in the industry, appreciate that communication and find it extremely valuable. Companies such as Unisys really value that collaboration I just mentioned, and we can drive mutual benefit for the Commonwealth as the consumer of that benefit. The exchange of ideas gives us the ability to identify and solve those business problems we talked about earlier. We both gain insights to what it takes to drive that success. We're not asking the Commonwealth always to understand how we deliver, and they don't understand how we build the solutions. We typically don't understand all the details of the business need of each particular agency you're trying. So again, that communication is so critical at defining what was believed as the requirement to actual, how do we accomplish success together? Developing those insights and clear requirements is essential, no matter what market or what business, whether it's a service provider in IT like myself, or a healthcare provider or various business. This reduces risk for both of us, and risk turns into dollars. It lowers failure rates when we communicate, which drives better results for the governor, for the agency, as well as the citizens who actually consume the service when we're finished. So that communication, that collaboration, removing the competition of state government and private sector is really key. We have a goal in mind, we have a mission together to solve the problem and deliver a better solution to us who live in PA. Developing the next generation workforce is another area that John also spoke about earlier, the pipeline of talent. This is very critical in any space. As you've heard testimony today, it's hard to get away from IT. Healthcare, IT. Our washers and dryers are connected to the internet now. Everything IoT creates a security issue. Getting to the right people is the key. In our practice, proactive use of small disadvantaged businesses to support our efforts. So as we gain contracts within the Commonwealth, both through mandate as well as from just the way we deliver, I engage a very large percentage of SDB, small disadvantaged businesses, in that delivery. We also engage in the mentor protege program, where we adopt one or two small businesses a year to help guide them, to help shepherd them through education of how to do business, how to market, how to present what the solution they've developed, and we help them go before the Commonwealth, Office Administration, or the agency themselves to pitch their solution, to gain them more business, help them grow in central Pennsylvania. It's the entrepreneurship we've heard about earlier. You know, when we have the opportunity to grow as a corporation, we also give the others, our supporters, our contractors, the opportunity to grow. An example of other extension into the workplace development is we're investing in scholarship programs. I personally worked with the Pesci Foundation this year, set up a foundation for a small scholarship for seniors in that group in Pesci schools. We learned through discussing through the foundation that there are many seniors dropping out of college because they don't have $1,000 left to pay for, which, as a resident of PA, and I attended Shippensburg University, I find that very hard to believe, right? So we're doing that activity. We're encouraging, we're planning the rest of the organization to do more that we can. We're also working to create internship opportunities with universities like Cheyney, with Harrisburg University, and other universities across Pennsylvania. We have resurrected and enforced our HR team to go out and develop proactively this internship program. Through the Pesci group, we will also have specific groups and educational teams we'll work with. I met with the president of Cheyney. They're looking for our thought leadership. Where should they take the curriculum in the marketplace? We talked about earlier is how do we bring the employee here to Pennsylvania? And that's a critical mass that we need to work on. We see a big ownership of that issue. Together, removing the barriers that are creating the job and getting the education that the student needs in the specific technology we need to consume, and then get that workforce to stay here is a challenge. One of the councils I'm working on is looking at, since the new generation of worker is very transient, they want to move. How do we keep them within PA? They start in Philly. They may go to Pittsburgh. They may come to Harrisburg. Have them move, be transient in PA. How do we create the economic situations? How do we have the cities work with us? How do we create the area that the people want to live? That relates back to your tax question, but it puts it into a consumer standpoint. How do people view living in Pennsylvania? What's the tax basis? How affordable is the home? That type of thing. The schools that my children will then use. Transparency in government is also needed. Whether the Commonwealth decides to use its own internal resources to deliver services to the agencies, or they engage partners like myself in delivering those services to the Commonwealth, there's a need to articulate and communicate the strategic objectives of the Commonwealth. The most successful state organizations and governments that we see have a clear, publicly available strategic information technology plan that's updated annually and posted. So everyone's clear of the objectives, how to execute for the Commonwealth's best interest. This allows for innovation, it provides direction, and lowers the overall cost. There are not gaps in what we're trying to accomplish. The Commonwealth must view the private sector as not merely a group of vendors competing for resources, staffing, but as a partner looking to achieve mutual growth and success for the citizens. While a lot of my suggestions today focused around our experiences from information technology field, they apply to all areas of government, no matter the field. If the Commonwealth collaborates with the private sector and competes on a level apple-to-apples basis, Pennsylvania will rise above. We will have a reputation that thrives for growth and expands the business that you just heard about. The incubations, how do we create the entrepreneurs? How do we keep them here? Increase the tax base. Like most states, the Commonwealth faces continuing challenge to maintain and improve quality of service it provides to the citizens. Constantly challenging, constantly changing. How do we secure them? Pennsylvania must continue to make improvements and steps reducing these barriers, fostering a marketplace that rewards companies that are nimble, competitive, and provide the best-in-class service or good. Cross-sector partnerships like this, where we can collaborate, benefits all of us. Again, it's transparency, it's the accountability, and it's the trust that's built through that communication that builds a strategic relationship that we see the best for both organizations. I'm pleased to offer our thoughts today. I'll accept any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Allwine. I'm going to go ahead and start. So I really appreciate the information that you've provided on collaboration, transparency, and workforce. And we focused a lot on workforce in the earlier testimony. I want to talk about the collaboration and the transparency. So I'm trying to equate it because, quite frankly, the technology thing is a little beyond me, to regular construction of a prison, of a building for the state. And my understanding of the process is that we have a pre-bid meeting, which is collaboration. You have those who might be interested in bidding, come, sit down, talk about what you're looking for. My vision, although I've never participated in this, is that there would be an opportunity to say, you know what, that really isn't going to work that way. Here's some other things, here's some other options. Maybe you change the drawings, maybe you change your thoughts on that. Then you get to the bidding process. Are you telling me that's not how it's working now currently with tech? Because then I leap to the 2014 hydro cloud, which I didn't even know we had a hydro cloud. So I'm interested in how that happens now. How did something like that occur? And maybe because we're not in the administration, we're in the legislature, we're not necessarily aware of all of that.
Sure, absolutely. So the technical execution of typically the bid process is that they will issue a procurement announcement. They will have a pre-bid meeting where the questions get asked. You know, typically a document's put out high level, where it's a request for information at that time, or if it's an actual request for bid. The vendors do get an opportunity to ask questions. Typically they relate back to the black and white written document, is what I'll say. So to foster a conversation, deeply understanding what I referred to as the business problem, many times we are just to look at black and white. Make it this big, make it that wide. It's very specific, right? It helps to understand, well, my real problem is this isn't working, the process. I'm trying to achieve the following things. And this is where the gaps of what we do today and where it's failing today. And here's my problem as a business person. That's the conversation that many times is not there, right? I'm not objecting to the way the current, it's not administrative driven. It's typically holistically of how the agencies are allowed to be open and speaking before or after. You know, and a lot of times this communication needs to happen before the bid process. It's inviting us in to have those business conversations prior to release. You're bound by legal Department of General Services that says once it's released, certain communications can't happen.
Right.
So it's really that collaboration ahead of time that really benefits us. It's having the strategic plans available and articulated to a point at which we see the business vision ahead of time and can come with questions to say, well, you mentioned the following is a larger strategic issue, yet the documentation says the following, there's a potential gap here. Help me understand, right? Collaborate with me, partner with me in that.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Representative Quinn?
I want to thank you for being here to testify.
Sure.
I wanted to ask a little bit about your scholarship program. It sounds like you're working with some of our PASHE schools. You're working specifically, you had mentioned Cheney. Are you helping any of the schools that you're working with their programs, with giving them direction as far as, like, specifically, I know one of your competitors will actually provide them with tools, modules, programming information so that they can take that and make sure that their specific products are being used in the educational process so that someone might have a certificate when they complete.
Right.
Are you working along those lines, or?
So currently, the scholarships I mentioned are directly for funding, giving to that student that I mentioned earlier, that $1,000 type of approach. We are working to get into more areas with, organizations like Cheney and with Harrisburg University. Beyond sponsorship is the engagement of potentially our employees teaching a class. Our IP, our technology beyond software is our people. We no longer build products, it's software. So we are looking at how strategic to work with a couple of universities or partners in that. How do we provide them with an opportunity to get the students hands-on? I was just approached by Harrisburg University about getting engaged in their innovation office as we have new projects that are venturing in new areas to somehow engage the students to also put their thought leadership in, have them figure out the problem and the solution with us as part of their curriculum. So those conversations are going on right now. So that is the type of thing we're looking at engaging in long term.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Really interesting information, and we know how to get a hold of you if we have some other questions on how we might be able to proceed with some of your suggestions. Again, thank you everyone for coming today. We really appreciate your time and your thoughtful testimony.